And welcome back to MPL Soundcheck, a weekly show where we talk about the latest news and happenings in MPL Philippines. And undeniably, Week 5 is the most competitive and intriguing week of MPL Philippines so far. There were 20 games played. The average game time for Week 5 was almost 19 minutes, so it was an epic one. Before we talk about specific topics, I will quickly share with you why each series was awesome. So it's like a quick little recap thing. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and like and share the video if you do like it and you want to share it. Also, leave a comment for the question for the day. What was your favorite moment from MPL Philippines Week 5? There's a lot to talk about, so let's get it started. So we'll run things down day per day, match per match, starting March 17th, Week 5, Day 1. Round 2 of Blacklist versus Echo went 3 games. Carl TZ finally playing tanks a lot and having a great game with it in game number 1. Blacklist clapping back in game 2 with some beautiful drafting. Then Echo winning game 3 behind Yawi's Ruby, pulling off some crazy ulti pulls as the Ruby. There was one scenario there where I believe it was Super Red under tower trying to hold, and then there were 2 or 3 other members of Blacklist in the shrub waiting to surprise anyone who would decide to dive Super Red. But Yawi initiated it, but the way he pulled, flickered with his ulti, it also caught the 2 or 3 other members of Blacklist in the shrub. It was a great one. Go back and watch that game 3 if you want to see it, but it was a great series overall. And then NXPE snapped their losing streak by getting the 2-1 win over TNC. They played a Paquito Jungle Demon Slayer emblem pocket pick for games 1 and 2. They dominated game number 1, but in game 2, TNC had a beautiful defensive turnaround. King Kong's highlight sacrifice played to get the Lord for TNC to extend the game. But in game 3, NXPE were dominant yet again. This was a really great showcase, honestly, between the two teams struggling this season who are currently in the bottom of our standings. Actually, no, just for TNC, because in the other bottom half of the standings, you have ONIC there. But of course, NXP has been also struggling this season. This was a great showing from them. I'm happy that both of them got points out of this. And then and for Saturday, let's move on to Saturday, day number 2, our triple header day. Bren Esports got revenge from Echo from week 1, defeating them 2-1. We were treated to the Kyle TZ versus Carl TZ show yet again, but this was just a great overall performance by all the members of both teams. And there was a few surprise last pick mid lane Julian, and I don't mean few FEW as in few played a surprise last pick mid lane Julian. Bren's drafts this game were fantastic. You could clearly see how well and how hard they prepared for Echo in this one. It is a definite must watch in studying the principles of drafting. Plus, it's just a really crazy and fun series to watch overall. I'm not even going to choose to recap like everything. There were so many moments here. Go back and watch it if you haven't yet. And then for the second match of our triple header day on Saturday last week, Omega versus ONIC went 3 games, but game 1 was one of the best games this season with a dramatic ending. Similar to how Lewis and Kelra beat TNC back in week 4, if you haven't seen that. The one where Lewis and Kelra were left to defend, and then Kelra's Moskov got the last laugh with Lewis's Lapu Lapu. Something like that happened again, but this time Omega were in the receiving end of that. As the old adage goes, isang one hit na lang. Actually, yeah, it was actually just like a hit or two, but it was just that was one of the ones that we'll get this week. There was a lot of that this week. It was a wild 32-minute game. Omega versus ONIC week 5, day 2. Game number 1 needs to be rewatched. Super fun and absolutely epic game. Please go back and watch it. Black versus TNC is both beautiful and heartbreaking, especially if you love underdog stories. This was the closer for the triple header day last Saturday, because TNC controlled majority of both games. It really looked like the way TNC started off the series, it looked like they were gonna pull off a major upset, get a game away from Blacklist, maybe even win both, because Escalera and Ben Things played out of their minds to control Yue and Oh My Venus specifically in game number 1 and even in game number 2. Escalera had back-to-back Farsa games, Oh My Venus had back-to-back Diggy games, and Escalera just kept dropping down Feather Death Strike after Feather Death Strike to send back Yue and Oh My Venus. So Blacklist had a tough time controlling the mid because of how well Escalera and Ben Things played in this series. 2 games. It looked like that. But then Blacklist's mastery of the lore dance and macro decision making pulled through. It looked like TNC were going to defeat Blacklist International for both games, but they just fell short. In game 1, it was one lore dance that went wrong, which led to Edward pulling off one of the craziest flanks I have ever seen, getting that double kill plus MVP to end the game like that. Only 5 out of 9 towers were broken by Blacklist, so it really was just like one play there in the bottom lane, in our point of view, in the bottom lane, that TNC got wiped out. They got flanked by Edward's Paquito because it was a long Lord dance for that game number 1. I don't think they even secured the Lord, if I'm mistaken. They just danced around it, and then you saw there the hesitation of TNC because Blacklist were contesting it really well. So TNC felt like they couldn't fully commit into actually getting the Lord. So they left the top lane, which was the first lane that they got a lead from. That was the gold lane of the game, if I'm not mistaken, or the expo lane. But that was the first lane that TNC broke, and so that's where their lead was starting off of. But then the problem was, during the Lord dance, they were just stuck in the Lord. They kept committing there. Edward was freely farming the top lane. He got so many minion waves. He broke 2 towers there even, that by the time he finally flanked, just 3-man knockup with a knockout strike. Beautiful combination, even ending with that double kill under the 3rd turret in the bottom lane. It was crazy. Go back and watch it. I'm not gonna put it up on your screens there. This is meant to be an auditory experience, so just go back and watch it. So there was that. Edward got MVP from that. Then in game number 2, almost the same story, except it was far longer, and TNC were a couple of minions plus a basic attack from Innocent Moskov away to win it via split push. Another isang one hit na lang moment. It was crazy. But Edward pushed out the minions with Final Slash as the R-Lot. So he pushed it out, but it was still slightly in range. So then Blacklist still had to take down the minions, but then Innocent just didn't have enough, couldn't get the damage done in time. It was just like 1 or 2 hits away for Innocent to end it via split push and force a game number 3. Super Red was commended for his MVP performance, as him staying alive was crucial for Blacklist's success in that game number 2. There was one play where Ben Things, after so long dancing around the Lord, he tried to commit a play to take down Super Red. But then Super Red got to use the go away ultimate just in time, trap Ben Things, and with the roamer down, Blacklist was just able to secure that Lord. And then right after the Lord, that's when the split push attempt by Innocent came in. And then that didn't push through, and then Blacklist just eventually pushed and ended it. And that was the start of that game. Let's move on to day number 3. ONIC PH beat RSG Slate 2-1 with a reverse sweep. Game 1, they were dominated by a scary RSG Slate performance. It looked like that was going to be the story of the series, where it would just be a dominating 2-0 win for RSG Slate, because the game number 1 ended in less than 15 minutes. In game number 2, ONIC controlled the first 5 minutes or so, but then RSG turned it around in favor for themselves. But then everything turned around after a Lord fight. Super Friends got to take down Eman, meaning RSG couldn't end it even if it was a wipeout. Super Friends got to come back fast because of the Faramis passive. So that long sequence started in the Lord pit. 3 members of ONIC ate up a Numenon blast from Light, or I believe it was 2. One of which was Super Friends. So Super Friends was actually the first casualty of that fight. Since he has passive off, he was able to come back right after RSG wiped out the members of ONIC PH. When Faramis, Super Friends came back, that's when RSG Slate were pushing. They didn't secure the Lord. They just decided to try and end it at that moment. Eman Blazing duetted on between the 2nd and 3rd turrets, but he got turret hits, and then Super Friends got to deal damage. Super Friends took down Eman, which meant RSG Slate was 2 members down, because if I'm not mistaken, if it wasn't Light, also Naths was down. So it was just Exort, H2, and either Light or Naths still up and trying to end it. But yeah, Super Friends got an MVP in that game number 2 for him and that defense, really. That's why they were able to win that game, because after that, this opened up the Lord for ONIC, the Lord that RSG didn't get, and then eventually ONIC just won with the Siege with that Lord. Then in game 3, it was back and forth early on until RSG Slate took full control, but RSG Slate could not end it. ONIC were defending out of their minds. Eventually, the final Lord of the game was stolen by Sensui single-handedly, with 4 members of RSG Slate around him. Sensui stole the Lord. Eman got picked off, trying to delay the members of RSG from helping Sensui in that moment. ONIC PH wins the game, wins the series. And so, of course, Bren versus Omega to close out the week. Bren controlled Omega in game number 1, but Omega got them with the counter punishes to turn the game around late. Game number 2, game number 1 was won by Omega with their late game counter punish turnarounds. Game 2, both teams had great drafts, but the Omega draft looked better for team fighting, and the Bren draft scaled better. So scaled a little bit faster. So Bren avoided team fights by focusing more in the gold lane and avoiding Stone's Eve as much as possible. Absolutely godly Hayabusa game from Kyle Teasy here. Go back and watch it to see Kyle Teasy go god mode in that Hayabusa. I believe he only got taken down once, or even had a perfect game if I'm not mistaken. And he had like 8+, 10+ kills, around 3-5 assists, 0 deaths. I believe that was his stat line. I remember, I was casting that game. And then game number 3, crazy story. Omega was in control for around 11 minutes. The kill score was around 9-0 at that point, but then one team fight, Super Marco got a triple kill and gave room for Bren to get more map control. So it was like one team fight. Finally, it all broke out. It was 9-0 up at that point, and then Super Marco got a triple kill. Keller couldn't chase him down, finish the job. And then because of that, that allowed Bren to get a bit more map control, because there were members of Omega's down, and then their members went down first, so then their members respawned first. And then eventually the game became even, and Super Marco just got the MVP performance of a lifetime. Like, he could not be stopped. Omega won the last Lord of the game, however. But they made the crucial error of deciding to chase and try and stop the members of Bren from going back, while also trying to take down Super Marco. Like, they were so over eager to take down Super Marco. It was just Miko and Renjo. They already had the Lord. It was marching topside. Kyle Teasy as the Ling. By the way, this was the game of the Ling versus Lancelot duel. It was crazy. It felt like an anime. Kyle Teasy was already stopping the Lord. Omega could have just gone back. They already delayed the members of Bren from going back, already threatened, but they decided to commit. And then eventually I believe all 3 members of Omega fell. It was Miko, and then Renjo, and then eventually Stome tried to catch up and tried to take down Super Marco, but they couldn't get it. And because of that, Bren would just eventually take the game, and it was a difficult loss for Omega, but this was such a fun series. It was a really fun series to watch. I suggest you go back and watch it. And yeah, there were many more awesome moments, but the ones I mentioned were the big story beats that really stuck with me. If anything I said pinged in your ears, caught your interest, consider giving them a rewatch. So at the end of week number 5 in the standings, you have Bren at the top, Echo at second, RSG and Black both have 15 points, but since RSG Slate have the better match win-loss record, and they also have the win over Blacklist International, they take the 3rd spot, Blacklist at 4th, Omega at 5th with 11 points, NXPE 6th with 10, ONIC with 9, and TNC at the bottom in 8th with 4 points. So there's a very tight race between Omega, NXPE, and ONIC for those playoff slots. TNC is still looking for those big wins to try and threaten that position. And now that we're here, last week we actually talked about the strengths of the top 4 teams. This week, I want to give some focus and some love towards the teams in the lower half of the standings, share with you my thoughts on their strengths and most redeeming qualities that they'll have to rely on to secure playoff slots. Start things first off with Smart Omega. Since their match against Echo in Week 4, they have been consistently getting points. 1 against Echo, 3 against TNC, 2 against ONIC, and even 1 against Bren Esports. Heck, they almost beat Bren Esports in their last match. They're a team that is constantly improving. They look better each week. Stome and Miko's chemistry between each other and the rest of the squad is becoming more evident and impactful for victories. And one of the good things I love about Omega is they're great at counter-punishing team fights and come-from-behind scenarios. Omega's unwillingness to give up and their scrappy and gritty fighting style is their best quality. It seems like old Omega's coming back. They just need to keep refining it, and if they do, they might even make it to the top 4 of the standings and make a threatening run there. And it feels like as the season goes on, the poison of Omega is getting more potent. It's becoming more potent. Let's see if that really is the case, and they'll end up becoming, getting back their old identity of the poison, the Lason that we call them in MPL Philippines. But it looks like they're heating up and they're on the way to doing just that. For next play EVOS, they got 3 points from TNC, a point from ONIC, 3 points from Omega, a point from RG Slate PH, 2 points from TNC. That's their record for this season. Now, I see them in a similar light to Smart Omega. It's like they're 2 sides of a coin to me, but I have been very vocal about my desire for them to not be so overly cautious. I know it's easy to say from an outsider perspective, but I really think that if next play EVOS embraced their aggression, their free-flowing style, early to mid-game dominance tendencies, and confidence that allowed them to shine in the amateur scene as Cerebrum, then they'll shine here in the MPL. The wins we saw them get is from them dominating early to mid and not letting go. They've also shown that they can pull off hero lineups that's dependent on a late game doming. So sometimes it feels like they're a team that have put a blocker on their own potential. It's like their biggest enemies now are themselves at this point. When everyone knows that next play EVOS' potential is high. We know it's there. And I hope that they know it's there too. I hope that they don't think that it's gone. All of us, the casters, audience, we see that it's still there. But it's as if they're so afraid to make mistakes that the hesitation eventually hinders them. But when that fear is gone and they don't hesitate, damn, next play EVOS is a really high potential team. So hopefully they contest and they contend for the last 3 weeks of the season. Last but not the least though, we have Onyx Philippines and TNC Pro Team. Now, I paired them up because I see them in a similar light. Like if Omega and NXPE are heads and or tails of the same coin, I see Onyx and TNC as either both heads or both tails of the same coin. They are both teams that have unique drafting strategies and patterns, their own sets of pocket strategies. They both have talented junglers that they can rely on to secure objectives in Sensui and King Kong. They both have a unique roamer and mid laner duo, Super Prince and Kekadut for ONIC, Benthings and Escalera for TNC Pro Team, where the roamer acts as the more solid and textbook balancer to the more aggressive and damage-heavy mid laner. For ONIC, positions 1 to 5, they're all doing a stellar job. For TNC, Benthings, Escalera, and now King Kong are standing out more in the team, but Hesu, Cram, and Innocent are raising the stock of dependability for the team. What they just need to work out is their big picture macro decision making. When Onyx macros are on point, how they handle the map as a whole, how they approach team fights as 5, they're a scary team. For TNC, we're seeing them handle the first 5 minutes of the game better, but once it gets to the major objectives, lore dances, map management, they struggle. If they don't take control early, however, they have shown that they can turn it around in the mid to the late game, so they have that potential. We've seen glimpses of brilliance from the 2 teams in the bottom of the standings, more from ONIC. TNC although have their fair share, and remember, TNC got their first series win of the season and 3 points with a sweep victory over ONIC. If they become more consistent and polish greatly for the last 3 weeks, Omega and NXPE will be threatened in their playoff slots. And if that happens, then we are bound to have an absolutely crazy ending to MPL Philippines Season 11 regular season. And then playoffs just around the corner. And that is it. And this is actually how I envision the length of SOUNDCHECK episodes to be, just around this time. Again, thank you so much for watching. As I'm doing this extra thing, I'm gonna leave the schedule up for week 6 on your screen. So it's covering my face right now, so I'm gonna leave it there for a few more seconds, but then I take it down and then I say thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.